Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PBA at Noon. I'm Paul Benwell, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Caesar. Today, we have with us Peter Londa, CEO of Tantalus Systems. Tantalus is a smart grid technology company that transforms aging one-way grids into future-proofed multi-directional grids that improve the efficiency, reliability, and sustainability of public, power, and electric cooperative utilities and the communities that they serve. Tantalus was key in keeping a fraction of homes in Texas powered during their February storm. They are on the cutting edge of maximizing current grids to be more sustainable. Tantalus trades on the TSX big board under the symbol GRID, G-R-I-D, and it's currently trading around $2.50. Peter, thanks for being with us, and please start whenever you're ready, and we'll have some questions for you at the end. Thank you.
You got it, Paul. Thanks for joining from the 18th green there. I appreciate the background today. Is the presentation coming across for everyone?
Yes.
You can see, great. Well, good afternoon, and Paul, Sophie, and the team at Paul Benwell and Associates, thank you so much for including Tantalus in the webinar series today. And for those of you who may not be too familiar with our organization, again, my name is Pete Londa. I have the pleasure of serving as president and CEO of Tantalus Systems Holding. We recently came to the public markets despite a long history in our headquarters out in Burnaby, British Columbia. We initially went public on the Venture Exchange earlier this year with trading commencing on February 9th. We quickly graduated to the TSX just last month on May 10th. And as Paul referenced, we now, as our home on the big board under the ticker symbol GRID, G-R-I-D. For those of you who may not be too familiar with our organization, I'll try to summarize everything that we'll talk about today on this initial slide. Tantalus has a rich history and is not a startup company in any capacity. We've actually been in operations now for 3 decades, and over the last 20 years have really been focusing to deliver what is referred to as a smart grid platform. We'll talk about what that means from a technological perspective, but fundamentally, everything that we do is focused on delivering technology and solutions to the utility industry in order to build what we refer to as the sustainable utility of the future. And if you think about the evolution and transformation of the utility industry from long ago to today, there is a significant amount of investment required to continue to enable and assist utilities to adopt new technology, decarbonize their industry, embrace renewables, and prepare for the variability of those renewables. And that's where our technology comes into play. Over our history, we've demonstrated and have delivered proven results in the form of continuing to scale our business with not only growth, but most importantly, doing that in a profitable manner and delivering positive EBITDA for the past several years. And as we look to the future, our technology is enabling utilities to reduce their environmental impact through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and most importantly, improving the efficiency of how we all consume electricity for every aspect of our life today. As we think about our industry and our customer base, and for the avoidance of doubt, we sell directly to utilities, so we are a B2B technology company. Our customer base, utilities, predominantly in Canada, the United States, and Caribbean Basin, our regional focus today, are really confronted and dealing with 3 very significant and extremely challenging dynamics. First and foremost, we've seen Mother Nature erupt over the past several years with a ferocity and frequency of storms that to a certain extent is unparalleled over the last 100 years. In the United States alone, where I live, last year, 2020, there were over 20 major climate events, or weather storms, weather patterns that blew through the US, each of which translated into, at a minimum, $1 billion in damaged infrastructure and economic loss. And to Paul's point, in Texas recently, just earlier this year during the winter, we witnessed an entire state in the US grind to a halt because the power industry and the utility infrastructure, the grid, was not prepared for the variability of the renewable power deployed in that state. The economic loss and infrastructure damage is estimated at over $300 billion at this point. It is a substantial issue. That is further complicated by regulatory drivers across Canada, the US, the Caribbean, and other portions around the world for the power industry to decarbonize their industry, meaning the reduction of greenhouse gases through a variety of different means, not only just the deployment of wind, solar, battery storage, and other renewables. In addition to regulatory drivers, we're witnessing substantial change by consumers, most tangibly the adoption of electric vehicles. That has a cascading impact on the utility industry and the grid that we all rely on. And where that really manifests for us in terms of opportunity is helping utilities confront these challenges and changes while upgrading what is otherwise a system that ties back to Thomas Edison's design in the 1800s, with infrastructure in many circumstances that was deployed 50 years ago and was never anticipated to support a dynamic and interconnected grid. As we think about the transformation required to help utilities prepare for the reduction of carbon emissions, what we do is help utilities, for lack of a better phrase, digitize their grids. And so if you think about your own home or your day-to-day, we're all encumbered by and reliant on a smartphone, whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung or Android device. In today's world with COVID-19, many people are still working from home, kids still being educated at home, right? The homes, buildings, further automation, relying on Wi-Fi and connectivity. The grid's no different. It's just behind. And so what we do very specifically is help utilities migrate from the legacy power grid of yesterday, where there was a central source of generation. I'm going to use my mouse, sorry, a little crude over Zoom, but central source of generation with a one-way power flow through a substation down to the points of consumption, residential, commercial, industrial. As the grid evolves and adapts and transforms to decarbonize and to support all of us day to day with reliability and improved services, we're witnessing a phenomenon and a fast adoption of wind farms, solar panels at a large scale, solar panels at a small scale on top of roofs, whether that's a commercial complex or a home. We're witnessing electric vehicles. All of these new technologies, while great for the environment, are problematic for the utility because they create sources of generation in places that the original and existing grid today was not equipped to support. And so having power at the home, as an example, with rooftop solar, changes the fundamental power dynamics and the load profile of a home or a building, which has an impact on the electric meter on the side of that premise. It has an impact on the lines that connect to the house up to a pole top transformer, and from a pole top transformer back to substation. And so that's where our solutions come in. We are helping utilities modernize their grid by creating a digital network. The way we do that is we deploy and have a rich history of building out a very robust Internet of Things capable communications network. This is what we refer to as our smart grid platform. It enables a utility to connect to a variety of different devices, whether that's a street light, whether that's meters on the side of your home or building, wherever you are today, load control switches that enable a utility to actually go beyond the meter into the building or home to turn on and turn off air conditioners electric heaters, coordinate with and turn on or turn off EV charging stations to the extent there is a massive storm that creates integrity or reliability issues on the grid, and other types of connected devices. Where our technology comes into play specifically is the hardware that builds out this very robust communications network, as well as a computing platform. And I'm going to use my mouse again, but this distributed computing platform, it's very much like the guts of your iPhone, and it is core to our intellectual property. We build this device and we integrate this device under a variety of different meters. We don't build meters, but we ultimately enable those meters to become intelligent, smart devices. We do build some load control switches, which is the ability to turn on and turn off power at the edge of the grid and into the home. And then what we do is, in connecting these devices through an IoT network, we then extract data and send data through our software and data analytics tools. And as we evolve as a company and help grid utilities modernize their grid, our goal and our purpose is very simple. Help utilities digitally connect to as many devices that are responsible for the delivery of electricity, access that data, and turn that data into information and predictive analytics so that the utility, no pun intended, is no longer in the dark from the substation down to where we live and work every day. Through visualization of what's actually happening through real-time data, we can help the utility command and control every aspect of their distribution grid, particularly as electric vehicles show up, as rooftop solar gets installed, as wind and other types of renewables become a more reliable source of energy for the utility. What our smart grid platform does, again, hardware, software, and then some professional services, is really four things. We help the utility improve the delivery of their commodity. Today, the vast majority of our focus is on the delivery of electricity, but we are quickly expanding our capabilities to also support the delivery of water and gas. When we think about the improved delivery of a commodity like electricity, we're focused on helping the utility improve their customer relations and their customer service, improve their support to each of us since we are so dependent on electricity today. We're helping them remotely disconnect and reconnect power. So instead of the old-fashioned way of sending a truck and having an electric utility personnel show up at someone's home to turn on or turn off power, with the push of a button on a keyboard, the utility can very directly turn on or turn off power. And as I'm sure as we get to Q&A, Paul, I can give a very specific example is how utilities utilize this remote feature to navigate through what unfolded in Texas a few months ago. The delivery also ties to forecasting and planning. As weather patterns change, as we get into the summer months, temperature rises, air conditioning usage increases. How does the utility have improved visibility to see how our consumption patterns will change as weather patterns change? We also are very much focused on improving resiliency. How does the utility get better prepared for storms? How do they trim back trees based on data from the edge of their grid? How do they ultimately target very strategic and very surgical investments in CapEx to upgrade feeders, to upgrade meters, to upgrade pole top transformers based on real-time data that helps them obviously improve what they do every day? As we think about ESG and the environment, our technology is very much geared to helping utilities reduce their environmental impact by reducing carbon emissions. Our focus is on the distribution side, not necessarily the generation side. But within the distribution network, that's where we'll see the electric vehicles show up. That's where rooftop solar and small storage will show up. How do we help the utility prepare and embrace those technologies and leverage those technologies to offset the need or reduce the amount of power they need from the coal-fired plants, the gas peaker plants, or nuclear power? We also are very much focused on helping communities. The stronger the utilities are that we support, the more they can provide to their communities in terms of improved power quality. Power quality metrics tied to directly attracting businesses to establish operations in communities. That leads to jobs, it leads to economic development, it leads to tax revenue. So we say quite a bit, our focus is helping build the sustainability of the utilities and the communities they serve. That's really what we deliver. Our purpose has led to prosperity. And a few statistics. From an operational perspective, we now support over 190 utilities across Canada, the US, and the Caribbean Basin. Once we are selected by a utility, our hardware for the communications network and that edge computing device get deployed, and it locks us into, on average, a 15-year relationship with the utility because it's very expensive to rip and replace hardware. That then leads to the opportunity for us to accumulate data over decades and drive software and analytics. One of the elements of our business that we take the most pride in is this middle data point. Our retention rate of our customers, the 190 utilities that we support today, is just under 99%. And this is not an annual retention rate the way SaaS models present or report. This is a retention rate through the life of our company over the past several decades. And I think it proves and validates the value that we deliver to the utilities and our ability not to just be a technology vendor, but a true partner. That longevity with our customers and the increased scale of our user community has led to some improved financial performance. Through 2020, we've now delivered 4 consecutive years of positive EBITDA. As I had mentioned, our solution, our platform, includes both the hardware, that's the sticky aspect of our solution, and then the software on top of that. Software and services today now represent over 30% of the revenue that we generate each year. It's a growing element of our business, and over the last 7 years, our software and services have a compounded annual growth rate of between 25 and 30%. So substantial area of focus for us. As we look to the future, we get very excited about the fact that today we are capturing 30 billion data points across 190 utilities, all of which leads us to enhanced algorithms and enhanced data analytics that tie to an opportunity to deliver SaaS model on helping utilities address substantial issues while simultaneously improving our margins and driving value for our shareholders. As ESG becomes that much more relevant, particularly for the utility industry, with anticipated regulatory requirements from a reporting perspective, we can help utilities quantify a reduction in greenhouse gas and reducing their impact on the environment through our system to enable them to be much more prepared and much more proactive in their reporting on ESG metrics. From a financial perspective, our financials over the last 3 years, 2020, well, Q1 2021, and then the last 3 years, 2020, 2019, 2018, have been presented in IFRS. The previous years were under US GAAP, which is how we reported prior to going public. I would also note that we report in US dollars, not Canadian dollars. So the figures here are USD. A few data points for you. As I mentioned, our software services are in excess of 30% in terms of total revenue contribution. Our gross margins on a blended basis are just under 50%. So last year, 2020, was a high watermark for our company. It's an area of focus for our management team. And I think it shows the scalability from a operating leverage and profitability perspective as we scale, that we can not only build high value products that blend software and services, but by commanding a gross profit margin in the upper 40th percentile and scaling, it will lead to improved EBITDA contribution margins as we absorb public company expense and as we continue to fund our own growth. In terms of some Q1 financials, all of which are available and publicly filed, they're available on our website. Year over year, it's a fairly strong quarter for us. Our revenue was up just under 11%. Our gross margin contribution or gross profit contribution was up just about 6%. And while small numbers here in the middle of the slide, EBITDA, a large portion of that compression on EBITDA is due to just absorbing public company expense. We've also lost almost $1 million in the SR&ED credit program as a private company to offset some of our R&D expense. As a public company, we no longer get that benefit in terms of cash reimbursement, something that we have to absorb through our normal operations. To the right-hand side, you'll see our balance sheet has only gotten stronger since going public. We've got a few statistics on that, but we raised just about $10 million in a concurrent financing in conjunction with our go public transaction on the venture exchange, and that's led to an improved and strengthened balance sheet. As we think to how to scale the business, there are a few very favorable trends and trade winds that are behind our backs. In the aggregate, over the last several years, on average, utilities in the United States alone have spent $40 billion a year in trying to upgrade their distribution grid. That's prior to some of the events that have been unfolded here in 2021. And we've been very fortunate to see these favorable trends continue to unfold, which we believe serves as a catalyst for strong growth of our business, not just over the next year or two, but for the next decade. First and foremost, the change in leadership in Washington, D.C. has been very favorable for our sector. President Biden is committed to ensuring the United States gets back into a role of serving as a leader towards climate change initiatives and rejoining the Paris Accord, something that the Trump administration chose not to do. The Biden administration is now negotiating with Republicans, right, with a massive stimulus package. And while the numbers will change over the coming months and something that we're actively tracking and have consultants working on our behalf, almost $700 billion of the original proposed $2 trillion are earmarked and allocated to aspects of our solution, whether that's resiliency, whether that's preparing for electric vehicle integration, whether that's proliferating broadband through some of our capabilities into rural and small communities, and most importantly, preparing for the adoption of renewables and decarbonization of the power industry. It's not too dissimilar to what we saw in 2008 in our sector when the Obama administration first came in and had a much smaller stimulus package at the time, but led to substantial infrastructure investment. In addition to what's happening in Washington, D.C., the Texas storm was a wake-up call, not only for utilities in the United States, but I think on a global nature. While Texas is ahead of many states in the U.S. on the adoption of wind and solar, they witnessed the loss of 40,000 megawatts in 24 hours. And why that's important for us is utilities need to have command and control on the consumption side of their equation. Utilities focus on how much supply of electricity, how much demand for electricity. The goal for a utility is to make sure those two things are balanced. When supply drops and demand increases, which is what unfolded in Texas, you have a cascading impact on the distribution grid. And so we specifically helped 7 utilities control the demand side of their equation while the supply side dropped exponentially in a very short period of time. As a result, those utilities avoided infrastructure damage, helped their communities avoid frozen pipes that lead to damage inside the home, and navigated as a community through what was otherwise a catastrophic event. We're also witnessing what I like to say is the electrification of everything. What's gotten the most attention of late is the electrification of the transportation industry. And while that's great in terms of avoiding greenhouse gas or carbon monoxide from vehicles consuming gasoline, it also means the electric utility industry has to be prepared to provide the power to support those vehicles. So while gasoline consumption goes down, electric power increases. That has an impact on sources of energy. It has an impact on the infrastructure, all the way down to the home. Again, that's where we focus. In terms of how to take advantage and leverage these trends on behalf of our shareholders, we have a four-pronged strategy to scale our company. The first is continuing to grow our user community above 190 utilities. We've been very effective to that end. The compounded annual growth rate of our user community growth has been 20% for the last 7 years in a row. As we access more utilities and get more devices, hardware, deployed at those utilities, it's giving us an opportunity to access more data that we can monetize through our growing suite of enterprise software and data analytics tools. As we're now public, we'll seek to ultimately expand and increase our product portfolio through M&A. That will also lead to a broader geographic expansion. And so, Paul, my apologies, I'm a little bit behind schedule from, I think, what you asked for, but from our perspective, we could create a very compelling investment thesis for investors at our current share price, whereby we are helping utilities reduce their environmental impact for the next several decades as they prepare for the decarbonization of the power industry. The opportunity is substantial. It will be trillions of dollars invested just alone in North America. We've got a proven track record of building a solution that helps utilities, today at 190 utilities and growing. The growth trajectory is identified with key initiatives that we are actively working on today as a public company. And we've got a fairly robust management team and board of directors on behalf of our shareholders to drive the company forward. With that, Paul, again, my apologies for being a little long-winded, but open it up for questions.
No, it's great. Thank you so much, Peter. So we do have some questions. Seeing as you are based in the States, do you trade on the OTC in the US? Any plans on going on the NASDAQ?
Yeah, so a few things. So I'm personally based in the US, but our company is
Oh, that's
headquartered.
correct.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. And so I can clarify. My office is currently based out in New York City. It's where I live in the New York metro area. Our corporate headquarters is Burnaby, British Columbia, just outside of Vancouver. That's where we were founded 30 years ago. And that's where the core component of our operations are. So we are a Canadian corporate entity. With that said, we do have shareholders in the US and we have employees and customers in the US. We are evaluating how to continue to expand the liquidity and access to shareholders for the company. We today are not traded on the OTC or a US-based exchange. I think as we scale and get our feet underneath us as a publicly traded company now on the TSX, we'll evaluate whether that makes sense for our shareholders. It's been a pretty quick and pretty whirlwind tour for us between RTO, go public February 9th to graduation May 10th. And it's a fairly quick graduation for us, but one that we were fully ready for. I think we want to get our feet underneath us, get in the normal cadence of reporting, build our liquidity and volume here in Canada, and then start to evaluate how we could ultimately attract a wider set of investors by potentially looking at other exchanges, not only in the US, but also in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Does Grid offer security or firewalls to utilities to help prevent hacks, such as the recent Colonial Pipeline hack? And do you, yeah.
It's a great question, and obviously paramount today with what unfolded with Colonial Pipeline and then one of the larger meat processing companies here in the United States. We don't specifically sell a dedicated cybersecurity solution. It is ultimately embedded in our technology. Everything that we do, when we think about connectivity and we think about the automation of meters and distribution equipment for the utilities. Every aspect of our solution takes cybersecurity into consideration. And so it starts for us first at that edge computing module with the way in which we capture data, and then how we effectively partition that data to communicate across a communications network. The network is by definition proprietary to the utility. So it's a little bit more like an intranet as opposed to an internet. Intranets can still be manipulated. And so we do a substantial amount from a technological perspective in terms of vectoring, and it gets very technical quickly on how we disaggregate data. So God forbid one of our systems for utility is penetrated by a hacker. They couldn't capture everything associated with one piece of data. They'd get fragments of it. We disassemble and we reassemble at the edge of the network and then back at the utility head end to shelter utilities. And I knock on wood to say, fortunately, the 190 utilities we support have never witnessed anything that's impacted the integrity of the system we deploy. With that said, there's not billing information or customer information that's transported. So we don't have concern about economic information, but we certainly are very much focused on ensuring that some frankly jaded individuals in the world would look to manipulate or corrupt the delivery of electricity. We're very much focused on that. As we think about diversifying our solution, we are evaluating, given our heritage and history on the security of data for utilities, whether we can and should deliver a dedicated cybersecurity offering that goes beyond what we do today on behalf of the utilities we support. I think there's an opportunity there, and it's one of the areas of strategic focus as we think about expanding through M&A.
Excellent. What are some examples of how utilities have changed their operations after using your product?
Yeah, so I'm gonna excuse, I hope I don't make people nauseous by scaling through the deck and going backwards, but I think it's helpful to have some bullet points to answer that question. So a few things from an operational perspective, and I'll put some context around it. Beyond the technical change, there's operational change. Operational change also leads to cultural change in the utility. And so I'll give you some examples. Where I grew up in New Jersey, and at my parents' home, they still have a meter that's on the side of their home. And we grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey. If you know anything about New Jersey, you may have flown in and out of Newark Airport. That's technically in Elizabeth. So it's a pretty industrial place, not the prettiest of cities. With that said, it's my home. So we're not in a rural footprint at all. It's an urban area. The meter that's still on the side of my parents' home is a meter that requires someone to physically come once a month and read that meter. And there are still utilities in the United States and Canada that do it that old-fashioned way. So when we think about change of operation, it starts there. We eliminate the need for someone to physically come to someone's home and read a meter once a month for purposes of generating a bill. And instead, by digitizing that device, turning it into an IP addressable device, an intelligent device, we're gathering data from that device, depending on the utility's preference, every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, every hour. So that then leads to not only operational change of how they collect consumption data, but we also collect not only how much power is being consumed at the home, what's the voltage, what's the current, what's something called the harmonics, which tie to the flow of power from phase A, phase B, and phase C. Power or electricity, it travels in waves. So we can measure, are the waves closer or are they wider apart from a power quality perspective, which leads to disruptions. So that then leads from an operational perspective, not only from billing, it leads to their meter management. It leads to the planning from an engineering perspective. It leads to, as we think about the integration of more control, turning on and turning off air conditioners, it leads to how to manage peak demands based on weather forecasting. It fundamentally changes how the executives in the utility think about where to allocate dollars on upgrading circuits, feeders. Those are the power lines that connect to our homes, pole top transformers, substation equipment. So the system is based on the data that we capture today. It is very wide and very deep across the utility from an operational perspective.
Okay, Paul, did you want to go ahead with a question or two?
A couple of questions. Your predictive analysis software that you have, is that available to every client that you have? Or is it you that monitors it and then like suggests to the client that from our data collecting or whatever, you should do this or do that?
Yeah, so Paul, we have a few components to answer your question. We've had an application available to utilities. We call it CLEVR, CLVR, closed loop voltage reduction. And that's available to everybody today. We sell that on the basis of a license and then ongoing maintenance every year thereafter. In March of this year, we delivered really our first AI-enabled data analytics tool. And what it is, it's called the Grid Reliability. We need to get a little better in marketing because it's a mouthful, but it is the Grid Reliability Data Analytics. What we're doing is we're tracking power quality data across meters for a utility. And from that power quality, we're helping utilities predict where they have a pole top transfer that's about to fail. Failure of a pole top transformer can lead to an outage for a few homes or an area. Even worse, it can lead to sparks. Sparks can lead to fire, particularly as we see areas out in the western portion of the United States, or some other areas that are prone to wildfires. And so that predictive analytics tool was introduced in March of this year through one of our press releases. This quarter will mark the first time we're really rolling that out from a commercial perspective and sort of end of Q2, so end of this month into early July. That analytics tool will be available to our entire customer base today based on the systems that we have already deployed. We will bring that into the market on a per meter or per endpoint per year SaaS model offering. It will be incremental to the revenue we generate today through software and services. We have not yet turned that analytics tool into something that can be available to all utilities. It's really today geared to help the utilities that are selecting our solution. And it's a way for us to differentiate against our competition.
One last question. We're running a bit long here, but this is, I think, you collect so much data from your 190 clients and they're diversified. They're like different infrastructures, different all kinds of things. How do you plan or can you monetize on this data collection?
Yeah, so Paul, thanks, and apologies for not making it more clear up front. The economics of our business, for every device that goes into the field, we generate approximately, on average, $125 up front. Based on our software and services today, we then generate an incremental approximate $4 per connected endpoint per year over the next 12 to 15 years. And so absolutely, our goal is get as many utilities using our platform. Our second goal then is getting as many devices connected to our platform that generate data. The third pillar of our growth strategy in our business is then monetizing that data. And while each utility is different, the deployments may vary, the types of meters may vary, the data is constant. And so when we build an analytics tool or a software feature for one utility, we build it so it's applicable for all utilities to drive scale. And as we think about driving more value for our shareholders, then we'll still continue to focus on the hardware side of our business because that's what locks us in and accesses the data. The vast majority of our R&D today, though, is on monetizing that data through software and data analytics.
And I've got one question that I don't like. Do you have any Bitcoin miners on your system?
So we don't yet today. There is some blockchain functionality within what we do in-house today.
Okay.
We haven't thought about how we monetize that just yet. But yeah, we don't have Bitcoin miners. I'm not aware of any that are actively mining within our user community of utilities.
because they're popping up all over the place. So it's eventually they're going to get to your system sometime.
I would think eventually it creates a very intriguing opportunity for us and for the utilities that we serve.
One final question. This just came in from somebody. What plans does Tantalus have for acquisitions for the next, for the next year or moving forward?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. First and foremost, while our company doesn't have a history of growing through acquisitions, everything we've done to date is really organic. We have some history of one acquisition in our 30-year history. Our management team, myself included, have a fairly robust experience on scaling businesses through M&A. And it was part of the reason why we went public, was to get currency in the form of our stock and additional access to capital to support our balance sheet. We are very active. We are active in evaluating a growing pipeline of acquisition opportunities. Where we will focus is not necessarily prioritized, but one is, how do we continue to expand our total addressable market opportunity, meaning the number of utilities we pursue. Some of that is tied Canada, US, Caribbean. Some of it is also tied to broader international expansion. A second area of focus is, how do we diversify the solutions and capabilities that can integrate onto our smart grid platform. So while it doesn't necessarily increase the number of utilities we can pursue, it increases the number of products, services, and software that we can sell to that existing customer base. So land the accounts, expand within them. Gotcha. And the third, and then the third area is really, how do we get smarter from an analytics and data science perspective relative to the data we consume? And so, I think there'll be a blend of some businesses like us, hardware and software. There'll also be some targets that are a little bit more software centric or a little more hardware centric. But that's how we're thinking about attacking the market.
Peter, phenomenal story. We're going to have you back in 3 or 4 months, like if you've passed some news and done some stuff, and really re-explain this. I mean, you've got a lot of complex data that people are crunching right now. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll be following you for the next 4 months, Peter. Great job on the presentation today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Paul and Sophie. I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll look forward to continuing to stay engaged and trying to help build awareness for what we do.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.